Hello, and thank you for coming to the next episode of The Soccer Basement. Of course, I'm sitting in my basement. You're not sitting in my basement. That would be creepy. But anyway, this is episode 2. It's kind of a 2A, 2B type of situation. Today we're going to be highlighting El Paso Locomotive FC. For those of you who missed the first episode, basically what I'm going to be doing each and every episode, I will be putting a spotlight onto a USL championship team in order to hopefully raise a little bit of awareness about the different teams, about where they are, what their functions are, who the players are a little bit. And the secondary part of this for me personally is my USL fandom, if you will, is out there, and I'm a free agent at the moment in the way of my fandom at the USL level. I have some leanings. I'm going to be 100% honest the entire way. I'm going to be listening to myself talk. Actually, I'm doing all of this research, and it's really interesting to find out about the teams, but ultimately my fandom is in complete free agency mode, and hopefully I'll be able to find a team that really is in my wheelhouse. At the moment, anyway, I have this bucket that I'm going to be selecting the new teams from. Which team I'm going to highlight is going to be picked out of that bucket. So if there is a club out there who has a bucket with their logo on it, that might put them in the lead, if you will. But today we're going to be putting the spotlight onto El Paso Locomotive FC, and the reason why El Paso is one of the teams that I am highlighting today, I'm actually highlighting 2 today, is because of a mess up from episode 1 where I said El Paso Toros. And I understand how that might have been a big disappointment from people who support those 2 clubs because they're both in Texas. But for whatever reason, I've spoken in front of large crowds before. I speak for a living to a certain extent, but for some reason that little green dot and the camera behind it, for some reason, every once in a while I mess things up. So hopefully you guys can forgive me, and we'll do the spotlight on El Paso Locomotive FC right after the word from our, in air quotes, sponsors. As I said before, I'm going to be highlighting teams, but in the way of the sponsorship area, we don't have sponsors yet. So I'm going to be putting shout outs out there for teams, or not teams, but businesses that I actually really like until we get some real sponsors. So for right now, we've got the Cavalier Store, 2920 Rivermont Ave in Lynchburg, Virginia. I love the food at the Cavalier, or it's known as the Cav around here, but the food is great. It may look like a hole in the wall. It actually looks to me like it used to be a post office or something along those lines, but it's got some of the best food in town. It's cash only. The hamburgers are spectacular, and for right now, since we've been in social distancing, quarantine type thing, my family about once a week will get food from the Cav in order to bring it home. And it's absolutely spectacular. When we eventually get past the coronavirus situation and we can actually bring ourselves into a restaurant, it's a very low-key type of establishment with college banners all over the place, and love notes to people carved into the tables. It's really, really easy going. So love that place. The bartenders get to know your drinks and remember who you are if you go in there enough. And our second place is Monte Carlo's Italian restaurant on Old Forest Road, 3230 Old Forest Road in Lynchburg, Virginia. I've got to sing the praises of Monte Carlo because being from New Jersey, All right, and I live in Lynchburg, Virginia right now. Being from New Jersey, the New York general area, the pizza in the New York, New Jersey area is famous for being very good. And then when you get outside of that area, it can be very disappointing if you've lived in New York and New Jersey area for a while, and eating pizza outside of that area can be a little bit of a disappointment. But I've got to say that Monte Carlo is one of those restaurants that I actually get my pizza from, and it's close enough that I am not going to complain in any way, shape, or form. And one of the other things about this is I have my own little quirks. And one of the reasons I like Monte Carlo is because they have a picture of B. Arthur from the Golden Girls at the counter. Yes, she ate there once, and they keep the picture of her up. My wife happens to be a big fan of the Golden Girls TV show, so I find that little quirk to be interesting. So as I go through the teams, I'm going to have my own little reasons why I choose them, or why I like them, or I decide not to like them. The El Paso Locomotive FC is the featured club of today. And one of the things that I'm doing here, as I said, my fandom is in free agency mode here, is not only am I trying to learn about the clubs, but for the sake of everybody else, but I'm also trying to find those little areas, those little overlaps with things that interest me that might get me to be a fan. Now, obviously, Lynchburg, Virginia does not have a team. If we did have a professional team, it would be really, really easy for me to just choose that one and stick with it. NCFC happens to be the closest one geographically, I think, but the Richmond Kickers are also probably right around that same time period away from me. That might play into it, but those fans who are already fanatical about their particular team, I'm going to have little things that I say are important to me, and they might not be important to you. So, I hope I don't offend any fans, but ultimately, I am doing this from a distance. I am looking at all of these teams with a fresh and open eye for the most part. El Paso Locomotive FC, the nickname is the Locos, established in 2018. Home is Southwest University Park, and their rivals are New Mexico United, according to the fan group member who got back to me about that. And the other Texas teams as well are slightly in that rival area as well. Now, I'm going to spend a little bit more time than I normally would on the logo here, because of the fact that they actually have a little section that explains all of the different reasons for why the logo is exactly what it is. So you've got a few things. First of all, the star for Texas. You've got the almost looks like mountains at the top of the crest, which is to symbolize the mountains from the area around El Paso. You've got the grill of the locomotive on there, which happens to have 11 stripes on it in order to symbolize the 11 players on the field who are working together as one. I think that's awesome as well. And then the kind of bottom part of the logo also follows along with like kind of the Spanish architecture and things like that. The design is semi reminiscent of those types of things. So really cool thought put into the logo here, and with the whole border and the Hispanohablante, and I'm not even sure which language I'm supposed to be speaking in here. Debo hablar en español o debo hablar en inglés? Yo no sé cuál grupo de personas son probablemente apoyando al club. Yo no estoy completamente seguro. I watched a couple of interviews with players and things like that were done in Spanish as well. So really cool. Seems to be a very hometown focused club on getting that part of things right. The owners is the Mountain Star Sports Group. Alan Ledford happens to be the president. His past is with El Paso Chihuahuas, which he is still involved with, which is the baseball team. And then he's formerly the GM of the Sacramento River Cats, which is another baseball team out in Sacramento. The ownership group has multiple sports teams, and so that's a good thing in certain respects, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. Coach is Mark Lowry. He's 34 years old. He's from Birmingham, England. The last club that he coached at was the Jacksonville Armada. He took over as head coach after Tony Meola left. It was first in an interim basis, and then he took over as the head coach on a more permanent basis. In his first year with El Paso, he helped them reach the semifinal. They lost in the Western Conference final, which would be the semifinal to the entire league, to the eventual champions. So the whole entire thing is young guy, seems to be relatively knowledgeable and passionate. His rise in the coaching ranks seems to have been almost meteoric, which is very interesting. Omar Salgado, 26-year-old. He was the first pick in the 2011 MLS Super Draft. Now, I'm going to have my own little quirky things that I latch onto about particular teams, why I might bring my free agent fandom to a particular city. This is actually an overlap with me, that I was at the MLS draft that year, and I think he was like 17 years old or something like that when he got drafted. He was a really young player, but I was actually like at there watching. I usually don't go to the draft. It's generally run, except for this year, at the National Soccer Coaches Convention. It's actually United Soccer Coaches Convention, but the draft just happened to be going on, and I decided to go in, and he was the first pick that particular year. 3 goals last season. He's a hometown hero. He actually is from El Paso, which I think is really cool. It's in a lot of ways, I think it shows a bit of community spirit, and at the same time, because of the level of player that Omar at least should be, according to his pedigree and everything like that. I know he's had some injury issues and things like that, but he's the type of player that a USL team signing shows a level of intent, and I'll get more into that in a few minutes. Logan Ketterer, he's the goalkeeper. He's 25 years old. He was drafted by Columbus in the 4th round. Obviously, Columbus Crew would be a decent level club that he was originally with, and then he went to Bradley University. So again, Logan Ketterer, a player coming down from the MLS ranks to play in USL. Ways to support. There's the 8th Notch, which is one of the supporters clubs. I think it's the only one that I could find anyway. And they were the people who got back to me about who the rival was and things like that. There's the Pub Club, which has viewing parties. There's different places to watch the games if they're away. So I don't know if that's going to become more important if games start getting played behind closed doors. I don't know where USL is on that exactly. Those things seem to change day to day, so I've not looked into it just that much yet. And here's my summary of the positives and the negatives. On the positive side, there's a connection to the community. They seem to have a pretty good finger on the pulse of the community and what's important and being part of that community. Salgado shows intent. In my opinion, having a player of his pedigree playing for a USL club, hometown hero, I think that shows an intent that they want to be a dominant team in the area, in the league. So I think that's definitely a positive. baseball team owned by same group. Obviously, they have a sports mindset and are looking uh, at the overall infrastructure. There's the baseball team has a marketing department and the soccer team has a marketing department. If they were separate entities, you're spending a lot of money on two separate things. But you've got an overlap there. I like that in general. But I'm going to kind of contradict myself here in a second. And Ozzy, the mascot, I I'm not a kid, and I wouldn't care about the mascot under normal circumstances. But this seemed like a good connection to the community type of thing. Again, you've got a big bat with the colors of the club in his ears and everything like that. I like Ozzy. I just have to admit that. Okay, so on the negative side, owned by a group that owns a baseball team. Now, why is that a problem? It's probably not a problem. All right, I'm not anti the idea of sports franchises being owned by one of those conglomerates that has, a baseball team, a basketball team, and a soccer team. It's completely fine by me. The issue that I had, and both of my issues with two of my issues in the negatives with the club are related to the online store. And the first one being that they're owned by a baseball team, and the contact information on the soccer website, like the club shop, is the contact is the baseball team's email. Now, I realize that's probably nitpicking. It's ultimately meaningless because the email probably goes to the same person anyway. I completely understand that, but it's a very minor, and maybe it's not a signal at all. But to me, as a fan, that's a minor signal that my team is second place. All right, second of the negatives, they play in a baseball stadium. Now, again, this may not be an issue, and according to what I've read, they're looking to move out of that stadium and have a new home in the future. Completely fine. Maybe it's a temporary thing. Obviously NYCFC plays in Yankee Stadium. As a Red Bulls fan, I get a nice chuckle out of that. But playing in a baseball stadium, again, it's that whole second fiddle type of idea. And then the last negative, and again, this is me nitpicking, is pricey merchandise. The home kit, I believe, was 80, or the home jersey was $85, which I know that the normal price is someplace around 70, but it was one of those things that that jumped out at me as a few different items within the club shop were just seemed like a little bit highly priced for a soccer club just starting out and everything. Again, this is just me being an outside person looking at the club from a kind of neutral at the moment, a neutral perspective, and trying to figure out whether or not I would put my fandom in the El Paso Locomotive area. So now the part of the episode where, just like I talked about in the first episode, there's always going to be that G.I. Joe type aspect where we're going to do the soccer life balance thing, where, in G.I. Joe they had learning or knowing is half the battle, which is, now you know, and knowing is half the battle. And for me, at least from my perspective, soccer life balance is a similar type of thing. And the other half of the battle, when knowing is half the battle, the other half of the battle is action, doing the things that you know that you're supposed to do. And that's where this particular idea falls under, to a certain extent. The idea of hydration is something that we should all know at this point. You should know that you should stay hydrated. The numbers that I would go with are that you want to drink half your body weight in ounces. So me, I weigh 180 pounds, half my body weight, 90 ounces of water. That's why I try and drink 2 of these a day. Okay, fill up that bottle twice and finish it off, and I've met my hydration numbers for the day. Now, a few things. Number one is water is water. Soda isn't water. Coffee isn't water. Tea isn't water. There are all kinds of things that are not water. Hydration is an important aspect of your overall health, and if you're not paying attention to it, it's real easy to fall by the wayside. All right, it's real easy to go through an entire day without knowing how much you've drank versus not drank. And the effects of hydration aren't just about your feeling thirsty or not feeling thirsty. It impacts the way that your muscles work. It impacts the way that you sleep. It impacts so many different things. So making sure that you're hydrated throughout the day is extremely important. And the athletes out there, especially, this is hugely important for you, making sure that you're taking care of things. And you probably need to go beyond that half your body weight in ounces. You're probably going to need to do a little bit more in order to make sure that you replenish on days when you work out and things. All right. So that is our soccer life balance moment for the day. And if you want to read any of my other blog posts or anything else, uricanlimited.com, and my email address is puric@gmail.com. And ultimately, if you are a club ownership or work within one of the fan groups or something, please reach out to me if you want to be a guest on this show in order to represent your fandom, because, here I'm looking at El Paso Locomotive from a completely neutral standpoint. So I don't have the passion that you might have about your club. So your ability to put that out there for me is extremely helpful. And the next club that we're going to be highlighting tomorrow will be LA Galaxy 2. So obviously an MLS affiliate. We'll see. I'm not in love with the idea of me supporting an MLS affiliate, but you never know. Maybe there's enough quirkiness out there to make it happen. So this has been Pete Urick for the Soccer Basement. Have a great day, people.